Sarah Thompson, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. I stood frozen in my childhood home, watching as the police officer handcuffed my mother. The dining room that once hosted warm family gatherings now felt like a crime scene. Emily, my stepsister, lay unconscious on the floor, surrounded by paramedics who worked frantically to stabilize her vital signs. This is a mistake. Margaret, my 68-year-old mother, screamed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the officer's arm. I didn't mean to kill anyone. It was just supposed to make her dizzy. But I knew better. I had just switched our identical mugs moments ago, causing her carefully planned scheme to backfire spectacularly. The tea meant for me had ended up poisoning Emily instead. Flashback. 3 months earlier, the morning of my father Henry's funeral dawned gray and miserable, matching my mood perfectly. At 45, I was burying the last person who truly loved me unconditionally. The rain had just stopped, leaving the cemetery draped in a somber mist that clung to the headstones like ghostly fingers. I stood alone at his graveside, my black dress soaked at the hem from the wet grass. The weight of loss pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. Dad had been my anchor, my North Star, the one constant in a life that had seen too many upheavals. My mind drifted to 30 years ago when Dad would lift me onto his shoulders at the county fair. "You're my whole world, Sarah," he'd say, his eyes crinkling with love as he bought me cotton candy that turned my fingers sticky and pink. After my divorce 10 years ago, he had been my rock, supporting me through single motherhood and career changes without judgment or hesitation. At the cemetery, Sarah. My mother's voice cut through my memories like a knife through butter. She approached with her husband William and their children, Emily and Michael. None of them had visited Dad during his 3-month hospital stay, not even when the doctors had given him days to live. Margaret wore an expensive black Chanel suit that probably cost more than Dad's monthly pension. Her blonde hair, freshly colored to hide the gray, was perfectly coiffed despite the humidity. William, her third husband, looked bored and kept checking his Rolex. "Thank you for arranging everything," Margaret said. Her eyes dried despite the tissue she dabbed them with in a performance of grief. I noticed her glance repeatedly at the lawyer approaching us, her interest barely concealed. "Miss Thompson? I'm David Wilson, your father's attorney. We need to discuss his will." Margaret's posture straightened immediately, like a predator catching the scent of prey. "When can we do this?" "Now, if that's convenient," David replied, looking at me for confirmation. "That's fine," I answered, exhausted and eager to get this day over with. While reading, 20 minutes later, we gathered in Dad's spacious living room. The house still smelled like him, Old Spice aftershave and pipe tobacco, though he'd quit smoking years ago. His favorite armchair sat empty by the fireplace, a silent reminder of his absence. David sat at the dining table, removing several documents from his worn leather briefcase. I'll begin with the formal reading of the last will and testament of Henry Edward Thompson. As he read through the legal preamble, I watched Margaret's face. She leaned forward, her eyes hungry, fingers tapping impatiently on her designer handbag. Emily kept glancing around the room, mentally cataloging items like a vulture circling carrion. "To my beloved daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, I leave my entire estate," David continued, "including the primary residence at 1458 Cedar Avenue, my vacation home at Lake Clearwater, my investment portfolio, and all financial assets totaling approximately $1.5 million. The room went silent. Emily's mouth fell open in shock. Margaret's carefully composed face cracked, revealing raw fury beneath the mask. "Additionally, to Margaret Thompson, my ex-wife, I leave my silver kitchen set, which she always admired during our marriage." "That's all?" Margaret's voice dripped with venom. "I was married to him for 15 years. I deserve more than some old silverware. This silver set is worth about $5,000, I said coldly. "And Dad didn't owe you anything. You left him, remember?" Flashback. The divorce. I was 15 when Mom announced she was leaving Dad for William Sterling, a wealthy executive she'd met at her country club. The memory of that day was seared into my brain like a brand. "Money matters, Sarah," she told me as she packed her Louis Vuitton suitcases. "Your father will never understand that. He's content being a high school teacher, living in this modest house." I want more from life. I remember Dad sitting at the kitchen table that night, staring at his wedding ring. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he'd said when he noticed me watching. I guess I wasn't enough for her. You're enough for me, Dad, I replied, hugging him tight. Present after we're reading. You need to share this inheritance, Margaret demanded, her voice rising. It's only fair. We're family. Fair? I felt decades of hurt rising like bile in my throat. Where were you when Dad spent his retirement savings on my cancer treatments? When he worked 2 jobs to help me through my divorce? When he raised my daughter while I rebuilt my career? Emily sneered, her pretty face twisted with jealousy. You've always been the favorite. What makes you so special? You're not even that successful. A marketing director? Please. I married a surgeon. I waited for Margaret to defend me, to show some maternal instinct. Her silence spoke volumes. Well, Emily, I said calmly, though my hands shook. Since you married so well, I'm sure you don't need Dad's money. Now, I'd like you all to leave. This is my house now. 2 weeks later, I had just finished moving the last of my belongings from my downtown apartment when my phone rang. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Sarah? Darling? Her voice oozed false sweetness. I've been thinking. We should try to rebuild our relationship. You don't have any family left now that Henry's gone. The manipulation was transparent, but something made me listen. Why don't you come for dinner Saturday? I'll make all your favorites. That chicken parmesan you loved as a child, garlic mashed potatoes, and chocolate cake. I was about to refuse when curiosity got the better of me. What was she planning? Okay, I said finally. What time? 6 o'clock. William and the kids will be there too. A proper family dinner. Preparation. Saturday morning, I sat in Dad's study, surrounded by his books and papers. A nagging feeling wouldn't leave me alone. I opened his desk drawer and found an old birthday card. Trust your instincts, Sarah. They've never led you wrong. Love, Dad. His words felt like a warning from beyond the grave. I decided to be prepared for anything. Childhood home. At exactly 6 p.m., I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. The 2-story colonial looked smaller than I remembered, dwarfed by the McMansions that had sprung up around it. Margaret had renovated extensively after marrying William, erasing most traces of our old life. I hesitated before ringing the doorbell, memories flooding back. This was where I'd learned to ride a bike, where Dad had taught me to play chess, where I'd cried myself to sleep after Mom left. William answered the door. Sarah, he said with his usual curt nod. At 70, he was still imposing, though I noticed his hands trembled slightly, early signs of the Parkinson's his family was prone to. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. The warm, cozy living room of my childhood had been replaced by a sterile showpiece from Architectural Digest. Margaret bustled around the dining room, setting the table with Dad's silver service, the same set she'd just inherited. Dinner preparation. Sarah, you're right on time. Margaret called out, her smile not reaching her eyes. Dinner's almost ready. Can I help with anything? I offered, following her to the kitchen. No, I've got everything under control. Why don't you catch up with Emily and Michael? I found Emily in the living room, scrolling through her phone. At 35, she was still beautiful in that artificial way. Botox, smooth forehead, perfectly highlighted hair, designer clothes that screamed trophy wife. Sarah, she acknowledged without looking up. Nice of you to finally visit. Michael sat on the couch, nursing a scotch. At 38, he looked exhausted, the stress of his high-pressure sales job evident in his premature gray hair and the dark circles under his eyes. The discovery, feeling uncomfortable, I decided to check on Margaret despite her protests. As I approached the kitchen, I heard the distinctive clink of glass on ceramic. Peering around the corner, I saw Margaret with her back to me, pouring something from a small amber bottle into a mug. She quickly tucked the bottle into her pocket when she heard my footstep. Sarah. She spun around, her face flushed. I was just making your tea. You still like it with honey, right? Right, I said, my mind racing. What had she just put in that mug? My years in corporate America had taught me to trust my instincts. Something was very wrong. The dinner. We gathered around the dining table, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. Margaret served the chicken parmesan with theatrical flourish, making sure to hand me the Dr. Tea personally. Your favorite, she smiled, watching me intently. I noticed Emily had an identical mug. While Margaret was distracted serving William, I quickly switched our cups, my heart pounding. Everything looks delicious, I said, taking a small sip from Emily's mug. I watched Margaret's eyes dart nervously between me and the cup. So, Sarah, William said, cutting into his chicken, what are your plans for Henry's house? Seems like a lot of space for one person. I'm not sure yet, I replied carefully. For now, I'm just settling in. Margaret kept glancing at me, her fingers drumming on the table. You look a little pale, dear. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, I said, taking another sip. Just tired from the move. The collapse. An hour after dinner, Emily was regaling us with a story about her latest shopping spree when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her face turned ashen, and she swayed in her chair. I don't. Feels so good, she mumbled, pressing her hand to her forehead. Emily? William stood quickly as she slumped forward, her head hitting the table with a sickening thud. Oh my God. Emily. Margaret shrieked, genuine panic in her voice now. Wake up, baby. Michael checked her pulse. She's breathing, but her heart rate is really slow. Call 911. I watched Margaret carefully as she fumbled with her phone. Her hands shook violently, and she kept looking at me with growing horror. The confession. I think I should mention something, I said calmly as sirens wailed in the distance. Emily and I accidentally switched mugs earlier. I noticed they were identical. Margaret's face went white. No, that's not. That can't be. Mom, I said quietly. What did you put in my tea? Nothing. She screamed. Don't be ridiculous. Then why are you so scared? What's happening to Emily? The paramedics burst through the door, immediately attending to Emily. As they worked, I pulled one aside. I believe my mother put something in my drink, but my stepsister drank it instead, I explained. She was acting suspiciously in the kitchen. The paramedic's expression turned grim. He radioed for police backup. The arrest. Two officers arrived as the paramedics loaded Emily onto a stretcher. I gave my statement, describing what I'd seen in the kitchen and Margaret's strange behavior. Mrs. Sterling, the senior officer, approached Margaret. What did you put in the drink? Margaret broke down completely. It was clonidine. I took it from Mrs. Winters when I was cleaning her house. She uses it for blood pressure. I just wanted to make Sarah dizzy while driving home. She'd crash, need our help recovering. She'd have to share the money then. The room fell silent. Even William stared at his wife in horror. Margaret Sterling, you're under arrest for attempted murder. The legal battle. The next months were a blur of police stations, lawyers' offices, and courtroom appearances. Emily recovered fully but suffered anxiety attacks. The prosecutor built a strong case. Margaret had stolen the medication 3 weeks before the dinner, researched its effects online, and planned the whole evening as a trap. During the trial, more came to light. Margaret had massive credit card debt. William's early onset Parkinson's meant mounting medical bills. They were desperate for money. I never meant to kill her, Margaret sobbed on the stand. I just wanted her to need us, to share what Henry left her. The jury didn't buy it. Premeditated poisoning, even without intent to kill, carried serious consequences. 7 years, the judge declared, with possibility of parole after 5. Prison visit. I visited Margaret once, 6 months into her sentence. She looked older, smaller, her designer clothes replaced by orange scrubs. I'm sorry, she whispered through the glass partition. I lost myself somewhere along the way. After leaving your father, I thought money would make me happy. But it never did. Why didn't you just ask for help? I asked, genuinely curious. Pride, she answered. Stupid, foolish pride. Reconciliation with Emily, surprisingly, the incident brought Emily and me closer. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities. I was always jealous of you, she admitted over coffee one day. You had this amazing relationship with your dad. My father barely knew I existed. William loves you, I protested. William loves his money and his image. I'm just another accessory. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. I'm leaving Richard. Your husband? He's just like my father. I married him for security, not love. Almost dying made me realize I want more. New beginnings. I used part of Dad's inheritance to start the Henry Thompson Foundation, providing financial assistance to single parents facing medical crises. Emily joined the board, using her social connections to fundraise. Michael moved to California, distancing himself from the family drama. William sold the house and moved to a senior living facility as his Parkinson's progressed. Letters from prison, Margaret writes regularly. Her letters are filled with remorse, therapy insights, and tentative hope for forgiveness. I understand if you never want to see me again, she wrote recently. But please know that I'm working on becoming someone worthy of being your mother again. I keep the letters in a box, unsure what to do with them or with my feelings. Present day, 3 years have passed since that fateful dinner. I sit on Dad's porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The old oak tree he planted when I was born towers over the house, its branches reaching toward the heavens. Emily stops by frequently now. We're not best friends, but we're family, the real kind, built on shared experiences and mutual respect rather than blood alone. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would think of everything that's happened. I like to believe he'd be proud of how I've handled it all, with grace, strength, and eventually, compassion. Margaret is up for parole next year. I haven't decided if I'll support her release. Some wounds heal slowly, if at all. But I've learned that holding on to anger only poisons the one who carries it. As darkness falls and stars begin to appear, I feel a deep sense of peace. Not because of the money or the house, but because I've finally understood Dad's greatest lesson. Love isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice. And every day, I choose to honor his memory by living with integrity, helping others, and remaining true to myself. The inheritance he left me wasn't just financial. It was the strength to stand alone, the wisdom to see through deception, and the capacity to eventually forgive, even if I can never forget. Tomorrow, I'll wake up in this house full of memories, pour coffee from Dad's favorite mug, and continue building a life that would make him proud. Some days are harder than others, but I'm no longer that scared girl whose mother chose money over love. I'm Sarah Thompson, survivor, philanthropist, and keeper of my father's legacy. And that's worth more than any inheritance.